Welcome to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. Get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and connected to the miraculous energy of unconditional love that I call Mother Mary. If you're a highly sensitive, highly creative entrepreneur or light worker, and you want to magnify your impact and your intuition, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Reverend Frances Faden, interfaith minister, intuitive coach, and author of Meditation is Friendship with God. I can't wait to share miraculous stories, books, meditations, messages, and interviews with other miraculous light workers just like you. Are you ready to magnify your miracles? What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hello, my miraculous friend, and welcome to another episode of Magnify Your Miracles podcast. This is Reverend Frances Faden, and I'm so grateful that we get to spend some time today helping you to magnify your miracles. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you the prayer that got me through the last couple of weeks with my bout with COVID, which I still am recovering from. You can hear it in my voice a little bit. But before we get into that, let's just take a few deep breaths together and get ourselves grounded and centered. Breathing in the energy of expansion, breathing out anything you no longer need. And just giving yourself permission to come into this moment. And knowing that whatever it is that you need to hear today, that's going to help you to magnify your miracles. It's going to support you in taking just even one step forward in your own spiritual development and your spiritual path. That's going to be what you hear today. So let's take one more deep breath together in gratitude. And we can begin. Well, welcome once again, my friend, to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. If you are just listening for the very first time, you will not know that this is not what my voice normally sounds like. I am recovering from having COVID for the last week and a half or so. And I'm finally feeling better enough that I can share some of my experience with you in hopes that it's helpful for you. And for those of you who are longtime listeners, hello, and thank you for the prayers that you've been sending me. I really appreciate it. It's made a huge amount of difference. And prayer is actually what I want to talk to you about, because the last 2 weeks have been really, really challenging. And you know, I am a big proponent of prayer in all forms and at all times. But I want to share with you what it was like for me when I kind of was at my lowest, physically at my lowest, mentally, emotionally, just on every level, really at the lowest spot. And what worked for me, because I know that there are going to be times for you when you're also in a low place, that, you know, maybe you'll go through a loss of some kind, or maybe there's something else that just kind of takes you by surprise and is a bit overwhelming. And that's kind of what it's been like for me the last couple of weeks. It's just been really overwhelming. And during a time of overwhelm, we want to hang on to something that we know we can rely on and that will carry us through. So as much as I'm a big fan of memorizing beautiful prayers and all of that, I just kept it really simple. And I'm really glad that I did, because it was the best thing that I could do. So let me start you on my journey a couple of weeks ago with what was happening. You're a highly sensitive person, just like me. And you might know that highly sensitive people tend to have sensitive digestive systems, which I definitely have had my whole life. And so my doctor finally was like, look, I want you to have some tests done. I want to make sure we rule out everything. So based on my age and all that kind of stuff, she decided that she wanted me to have not just a colonoscopy, which would have been fun in and of itself. I'm sure you would agree. But she also wanted me to have an endoscopy at the same time. So it took a lot of prep to do that. I couldn't eat, the day before. I had to be on a liquid diet. And then I had to take all this prep stuff to clear out my whole system. So by the time I went for my procedures, I hadn't eaten in about 2 days. Now, for those of you who are similar to me, I have great respect for Western medicine, but I do not hang around in the realm of Western medicine very much, because I tend to put the priority on taking really good care of myself. I take care of myself physically, through my diet, through exercise, take care of myself mentally and emotionally, through prayer and meditation, and having a background in 12-step recovery, and lots of different things that I do to take care of myself. And so I'm very much of the prevention mindset, and I've lived that way my whole life. And I go to acupuncture and I do all kinds of things to take care of myself. So I'm not really in the realm of Western medicine very often. And so just being in that environment was a little nerve-wracking for me, as you can imagine. So I hadn't eaten. I'm going into a medical environment, which I'm usually never am. I had to be there by myself because we're still here in a pandemic here in the United States. So my wife Deepa couldn't come with me. I had to be there by myself. Going into a totally different environment than I'd been in. I'd never been to this facility before. And I was feeling nervous, to say the least. Plus, I'd never been under any kind of anesthesia. I had never had any procedure. I've never had any surgeries. I've never had anything. When they were checking me in, the lady couldn't believe it. She's like, "Are you being treated for anything?" I said, "Nope." "Hypertension?" "Nope." "Surgeries?" "Nope." Nothing. So this was a first for me. So I was really nervous. I was really, really nervous because I didn't know what to expect. And I also, will be perfectly honest, I have a little anxiety around medical facilities in general. I don't like going to them. They make me really uncomfortable. So here I was a couple weeks ago in this facility, and they were perfectly lovely. They did a fine job with me, but I couldn't get myself to calm down. And I think it was a combination of not eating and being there by myself, fear of the unknown, and just piled all on together. And so I was sitting in the waiting area, waiting for them to call me to bring me back to get me ready. And I kept thinking to myself, what should I be praying? I should be saying a prayer. I should be praying something. What am I going to pray? And so I tried. I kept racking my brain. I was like, should I pray a rosary? And I just couldn't get it out of my mouth. I just couldn't do it. And I kept thinking about all the different prayers that I know. And finally, all I could do, the only prayer that would come to me, was Mother Mary's name. So I just kept saying over and over and over, "Mother Mary, Mother Mary, Mother Mary, Mother Mary, Mother Mary." Mentally, I'm not saying it out loud. Mentally, I'm just going, "Mother Mary, Mother Mary, Mother Mary, Mother Mary." And that did the trick. That's the thing. Now, there's actually a long history of this type of a prayer. The prayer of God's name, whatever God is for you. So for some people, the prayer of God's name would be Jesus. People would say Jesus Christ or Lord Jesus or whatever it might be. If you were in a different part of the world, you might be saying the Buddha. You might be saying, Lakshmi, or, any form of the divine. But calling God's name is a really ancient prayer, and it's a very powerful, powerful prayer. I call it the when all else fails prayer. It's like picking up the phone and being like, "Mom." And if you've ever seen the movie Gandhi, or you've read any of his biography, you know that at the moment that he was assassinated, the name that he said was Rama, Rama, Rama. And that got mistranslated, but in the West, people thought he got shot and that he was like, "Oh God." But that's not what he was saying. He was not saying, "Oh God." He was calling God's name, Rama, Rama, because he wanted to die with the name of God on his lips, so that he knew that Rama would come and get him and carry him over to the other side. And he wanted to be in that consciousness of Lord Rama. So for Gandhi, Lord Rama was God. And so that's the name that was on his lips. We want to remember too that even Jesus referred to God as Abba, Abba, which is basically daddy. It was unheard of at that time in that culture to refer to God, which they came up with other names for God because you weren't allowed to say God's name, because God was so beyond everything that you could even comprehend, that we could even say the name of God was just like, oh my God, it just was beyond. And yet here comes this amazing man who dared to call God Daddy. Daddy. And he called out to him in his own time of suffering. And so the prayer to really carry us through is God's name. Now, that could be anything for you. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but since you do listen to this podcast, I'm assuming you probably have an affinity for Mother Mary, or at least for the Divine Mother. And I'm encouraging you to come up with whatever that prayer might be for you. What's the name of God that you're gonna reach for when all else fails, when you can't think of anything else, when your anxiety is so high that you just can't even think of anything, which is where I was. My anxiety was pretty high that day. And all I could think of was Mother Mary, Mother Mary. So that's the prayer that got me through that day. And for those of you who don't know, if you've not had an endoscopy, that's when they take a small camera and they put it down your throat, go look around in your upper part of your digestive tract and your stomach and all of there. But your mouth is wide open for about an hour. And so guess what happened? After 2.5 years of being really good and wearing my mask everywhere I go and washing my hands and socially distancing and not going to any parties and not visiting family, like I've been so good for the last 2.5 years. And then I go and I get this procedure and the facility gives me COVID. That's right. So I come home after my procedures and the next day I start having a bit of a sore throat. Day after that, my ears start hurting. And then I wake up with a really bad fever and was again in that place where I was not in my right mind. So here I am with a fever, worst sore throat I'd ever had in my life. Had to go get a COVID test to see if that's what it was. And I didn't know for 24 hours if that's what it was. Turned out that that's what it was. And again, lying in my bed, fever, sore throat, can't even swallow, can't eat or drink anything. And all I could think of was, Mother Mary, 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 Mother Mary. Now, the truth of the matter is based on how other people have gotten sick, I consider myself extremely, extremely lucky and extremely blessed. Was I more tired than I've been probably my whole life? Yes, I was. But my lungs never got affected by anything. My fever never went up past 101, 101.5, I think is as high as it went. I had everything that I needed. I got to sleep. I was able to move my clients around. Everybody was very, very kind to me. And the truth of the matter is I feel like I was really, really blessed because I knew that I was being watched over by Divine Mother. Even though I did have to go through this process, I knew that I was being watched over. And then I just kept calling on her and just kept calling on her and just kept calling on her. And then as the week went by, my fever broke, started to feel a little bit better, started to get a little bit more of an appetite, started to feel a little bit more like myself. Unfortunately, I ended up getting my wife sick. So then I went from being the sick one to having to take care of somebody who was sick. But even in that, I just felt this energy of grace, this energy of grace that was just watching over us and making sure that we were okay, making sure everything was going to be okay. Was it ideal? No, it wasn't ideal. But compared to what it could have been, in my mind, it actually was miraculous. So I just wanted to share that story with you, my friend, in case you find yourself, God forbid, you end up getting sick with COVID or anything else. God forbid that you have to go into a medical facility like I did and don't have the protection of that mask. And I'm going to say I'm a huge fan of wearing a mask. I think over the last 6 months or so, I've been to see my sister in the hospital several times, and that mask really kept me protected, washing my hands, the whole 9 yards. It kept me very, very protected. God forbid you find yourself in a situation where you have to take off that mask and you're in a medical environment where there's lots of stuff floating around. I hope that doesn't happen to you. But if it does, or if you find yourself in a situation where you just can't calm down, you're just finding yourself so anxious or so nervous or so upset or so distraught that you can't even think of what prayer to say, just call on the name of God. Call on the name of God. And don't get in your head about it and think about, oh, which name is the best name of God? Should I say Yahweh? It's basically the name, like, remember when I know for me, when I was a kid, I remember getting lost in the supermarket. You're lost in the supermarket and I'm running up and down the aisles. I'm probably like 7 years old and I can't find my mom, right? And out of the depths of my soul, I just was like, Mom! Of course, every woman turns around in the store because everybody responds to that call, right? And of course, my mom found me. But that's the kind of prayer that this is. This isn't an intellectual prayer. This is a prayer where you're like, Mom! You're calling Divine Mother. So don't get in your head about it. Think about, what that name is to you. If it's Jesus, great. If it's Buddha, great. If it's Rama, great. Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's personal and it means something to you. And that when you call that name, you know who you're calling. And that being is going to come to you just like that. Because God always responds to that cry, whether we say mom or dad or friend or whatever. But it's that deep, heartfelt prayer when we say, oh, Divine Mother, and we really call from our heart. That is the prayer that gets us through the most challenging times. I promise. So that's what I wanted to share with you, my friends. I'd love to hear about your thoughts about this. And what's your name for God? Do you have a name that you call the divine? Have you ever had a time like that where you just were at your wit's end and you just didn't know? Or maybe somebody that you cared about was in the hospital or was having to have some kind of procedure, or maybe your life got turned upside down. Could be happening to you, could be happening to people that you love. Those are those moments where we have to reach out. It's like touching the hem of the garment. It's not just a light tap. It's like a grabbing on and hanging on to that grace, hanging on to that love, hanging on to that comfort. I highly encourage you to do it in whatever way works for you. And I'd love to hear you share your stories with me as well. Remember, my friend, that the key to magnifying your miracles is to know that your miracle is already here. And if you did enjoy this episode, I would so appreciate it if you could share it with your friends, share it on social media, let other people know about it. And if you could leave a review, that would help me out the most. Thank you so much, my friend. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. I'm so grateful to be able to spend this time with you. If you want even more inspiration, feel free to visit my website, francisfaden.com or magnifyyourmiracles.com. And if you did enjoy this episode, I would really appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you connect with awesome podcasts. Remember, the key to magnifying your miracles is remembering that your miracle is already here.